Welcome to the stream. I'm Femi OK. Hundreds of thousands of people have rallied across Lebanon in the largest protest seen there in years. Demonstrations are calling for the government to resign, but can they succeed in getting concrete change? Send your thoughts through Twitter and YouTube, and you could be part of today's conversation. Thousands of demonstrators across Lebanon are now rallying into a second week in the biggest outpouring of popular dissent since 2015. The protest was sparked by the government's plan to impose a tax on the use of WhatsApp and other internet services. For many Lebanese already struggling to get by, that was the final straw. While the government has since pledged reforms and removed new taxes from next year's budget, protesters say that the measures fall short. Lebanon's president today sought dialogue with the protesters in his first public speech since the demonstrations began.
I call on you to observe, to act as monitors until all these reforms are implemented without crippling the movement. And I will act as a guarantor, and I will expose and reveal whatever is taking place. And I will do all that I can to have these reforms implemented. I have listened to calls to topple the regime, but the regime cannot be toppled from the streets.
We are joined now from Beirut by Al Jazeera correspondent Stephanie Decker. Hi there, Steph. If you don't mind, I want to show our audience how you are getting around in these protests, which are huge, and these demonstrations. There's only one way that you can do it effectively. Let me show our audience. Let's go ahead and play that video.
So Ali's trying to tie the bag to the bike because the roads are closed.
Seth, you're there in the thick of things. As a correspondent trying to get a perspective for our Al Jazeera audience, what are you seeing? What is the story from your perspective?
Well, it's really moved. I mean, that video you just played, that was Friday night when I just arrived from the airport, and they'd blocked the roads really throughout the capital. So the police and the army used heavy-handed tactics. So the way we operated, and then the next day, as we all know now, nothing happened and tens of thousands came out to the streets, and it just started to grow. So what we do, we've been going live from right in the middle of the crowds. We have our sat truck. We've been pretty much standing on the satellite truck doing the lives and grabbing people throughout the night and interviewing them live. And the message is the same. And of course, this crowd is made up by so many different people. So we were in Beirut for 4 days. I've just come back from Tripoli. We were there for 2 days as well, which is Lebanon's second city. It's a neglected city. The protests there have been massive, and I think a lot of people were surprised by that. There was that viral DJ video that everyone first kind of thought it was in Beirut, but it was in Tripoli, which is a city that's traditionally seen as more conservative, I think. So we're trying to get as many voices, talking to many people. We do different kind of reports, political reports, focusing on different kind of people, what they're, yeah, that's the video you're playing of the DJ, of what they want. And the message is the same. The fact that the people are fed up, the fact that it's corruption, it's their living conditions. They say they've been promised so many things. They pay taxes, get nothing in return. They want accountability. And also quite a beautiful thing that you see is that people say they've been so disappointed in the past. They know it's difficult, but there's a renewed kind of hope. So I think these are extraordinary times there as a journalist to cover it. Nobody knows how things are going to play out. I've asked this to everyone, from ordinary people to politicians to analysts. Everyone will tell you we have no idea, and certainly are under no illusion that it's going to be difficult. But just watching the people and the mix of people, of course, which is so important here, coming together against these leaders that they say have been, oh God, that have been in charge for so long. That was someone who just jumped on our car and kissed me live on air. But that shows you just the positivity of these protests and how important the people are trying to keep them peaceful. I think that's so key. We've seen, of course, there's been randoms in the crowd that will try and throw things at the army or the police to provoke them. And you've had these crowds of girls, particularly at the front line, who will put their hands up. You've had religious leaders, you've had young men, and they all keep shouting, peaceful, peaceful, because this is a peaceful protest. They don't want to lose their legitimacy. And there's massive momentum. But I think, again, the government isn't standing down.
Right.
The people aren't taking off the streets. We don't know how it's going to play out.
All right, Steph, thank you so much. I know you are filing your next report for Al Jazeera. We will watch out for that on Al Jazeera, aljazeera.com, and of course on Al Jazeera English as well. Steph Decker, she's one of our correspondents. She is right there in Lebanon covering the protests. Thanks for joining us. We are going to continue our conversation, and we're joined now by Rim Rifai. She's in Tripoli. She's an activist who has joined the protests. Nizar Hassan is a political organiser and co-host of the Lebanese Politics podcast. He's in Beirut. And also in the Lebanese capital, we have Timur Azari. He's a journalist at the Daily Star. Hello, everybody. It's good to have you. Reem, I have to show this picture. You shared this with us. Looking very closely at the sign that you are holding up while you're protesting, the world needs a woman-led revolution. Now, this ostensibly, this protest started because there were going to be taxes on WhatsApp and internet services. And then you're out there holding up your revolution sign. Join the dots for me. How did it get this far?
Well, I think the last straw for the population was actually the WhatsApp problem. But there has been a lot of problems that preceded this problem. And this is why I believe it's a revolution, because what is happening on the streets has never happened in Lebanon before, where you see people from different sects uniting under one flag instead of, their different political parties going down on the streets saying that we want our rights. This is the first time that it happens in Lebanon.
I just want to go to Pollyanna. All of the comments that we have from our video commenters, they're all protesting right now. Pollyanna told the stream why she is out on the streets right now in Lebanon. Have a listen.
I'm protesting this week in Lebanon because I recognize that our current socioeconomic conditions are the direct result of the complete and consistent failure of the ruling political class, and they have therefore lost all credibility to implement any of the changes we want to see. I'm protesting because I demand better political representation outside the confinement of the sectarian identity. And I'm protesting because as a woman living and working in Beirut, I want to hold my government accountable for robbing me and many others like me of a chance to imagine a future in Lebanon.
Lisa, I'm just looking at that. You study social movements. You've got one happening right there on your doorstep. Can you explain to our international audience why you think it is happening right now?
Yeah, in my opinion, it's a moment that makes sense for this uprising to be happening in. It came after years of economic crisis, and we're feeling it right now. The world is, the country is on the brink of an economic collapse, and this is the #1 anxiety for everyone. It came after a week of wildfires, or a few days of wildfires that wrecked the country's forests, and where the state could not even manage because of its incompetence, whereby it didn't even maintain the firefighting helicopters that it had received as gifts. It comes over years and years of promises of fixing corruption, fixing economic livelihood issues, livelihood conditions, and reforming the economy by the ruling elite, and failing miserably to do any of those jobs. It comes after, at least a year of total government failure in getting anything done. A government that has all of the major political parties in it, and they can't agree on something constructive and helpful for the people. So, of course, it makes sense. And it comes after years as well of other protests and other protest movements. And we had one in 2015 that was also big in scale, not as large as this one, but also large in scale, where people came together and, triggered by the garbage crisis, the waste management crisis back then, came together and raised very similar, actually, rhetorics and demands that they are raising this time. Although this time they are much more united.
Timo, I see you nodding. Go ahead.
Yeah, I mean, to pick off where Nizar sort of left off, what's important is that these protests are actually different than 2015. 2015 was very centralized in the capital in Beirut. It was then also about, something tied to ecology, basically the government failing at waste management. But this time around, we've seen protests spring up in literally, tens and tens of locations across the country. On the first night, last Thursday, we had reports of 60 areas. And what that means is that you have people from all across Lebanon's communities, which, is a nice way of saying, sects, religious sects, and people of different classes, all in the streets together, and really unifying around, really unifying around it's around the economy, it's around ecology, it's the buildup of all of these things over all of these years, all the mismanagement. And the taxes in the end really was just the last straw. It was like, while the country is still smoldering from some of the worst wildfires we've had in decades, the government the next day comes and says, oh, by the way, we're also going to be putting taxes on you on top of the mismanagement we've already done. This would be a good point to mention something that came up, as we were coming on the show, as we were prepping to come up, on the show. When we were asked to come on, we were asked what our sects were, what religion were part of. And this caused a bit of a stir online. There's a tweet up there with some colorful language for those who are interested. And I think it is an interesting point because for a long time, the Middle East in general, and Lebanon specifically as well, has been viewed through a sectarian lens. Our parliamentary seats are allocated by sect. It's, every story you'll see is about the Shiite Hezbollah movement or the Christian movement.
And Timur, if I could just add, and please carry on. It's just the reason that we would ask our guests what sect they are from is because Lebanese politics is so divided that we wanted to make sure that we were inclusive and then reflected everybody. So it may have been insensitively worded, but it was particularly important that we felt that we had a representative show. Go ahead.
I think it's interesting because it's sort of seemed to a lot of people of like a remnant of a system or a way of thinking that might no longer be relevant now. I mean, what this movement is about is that we're in the streets together, and we're in the streets together not because we're Sunni and Shia. We're in the streets together because we've all been oppressed, and that's sort of the unifying factor. And so maybe we should stop thinking, when we think of bringing people on TV or when we think of people in general, we should stop thinking now about a diversity of sects and maybe think of a diversity of thoughts. Not think of a coexistence of different religions, but a coexistence of ideas. And that way we can foster a real politics, and that's what we're seeing on the street. We're seeing people who are more nationalist. We're seeing people who are more progressive. And that's brilliant. That's exactly what we need.
Yeah, that's good. That's good advice, Timur. We do really appreciate it. And off the back of that comment that happened yesterday, we are following up on that. But we really appreciate that feedback and advice for us as a show. Talking about unity in Lebanon is really important. It's something that another protest that Ibrahim brought up to us. I just want to add his comment to this conversation.
So what I want out of this protest and what I want out of this revolution goes far beyond just toppling down the system. For me, what I want is a complete reformulation, a rebuilding of the Lebanese identity. I want us as a people to get past our sectarian biases, to beat our past, to beat our issues, our collective traumas, and get out of this protest, get out of this revolution, a stronger, more united people, regardless of race, sect, religion, or gender. Unity is our power.
Reem, this is huge. This means that these protests are asking for so much more than just get rid of the taxes. We don't want to pay more taxes. There's so much more. It's almost like you're rebuilding Lebanese society. What's your take?
My take is that this is more than necessary because honestly, I feel like this is how we heal the wounds of civil war. Some people were criticizing that the protests were too peaceful for a revolution. But I say this is the first time that the Sunni, the Shia, the Druze, the Christians have held hand in hand and gone down to the streets with only the Lebanese flag. Many people across the country are asking for the sectarian system to change. They want a civil society. They want a society that lets you vote not on the basis of your sect, but on the basis of what your ideology is. And this is what we are asking for. This is what we have been asking for so many years.
And Reem, the Civil War ended in 1990, so it's been quite a long recovery process if the politicians are still using that as a reason for why there should be austerity. Nizar, this idea about rebuilding Lebanese society and this being a revolution. Is it a revolution or is it just a series of protests that have gone on for over a week?
All right, so let me divide the question. Just picking up on what Reem was saying about the civil war aspect of this. And me and Taimur talked about this he was on my podcast, the latest episode, and we were talking about how this is kind of the end of the civil war in terms of not only people from different sects coming together, in terms of changing what constitutes political conflict in Lebanon from the vertical divisions between religious groups to horizontal divisions between the basis of these sectarian parties that are ruling the country, the grassroots basis of these parties who are paying the price of the bad policies and the corruption, etc., and the elites ruling them. So this is what's most significant to me about it, is that it's bringing together people but also against a common enemy that all of them used to, at some point or another, maybe support, and maybe even supported in the latest election. Concerning whether this is a revolution or not, this is a very long, a big question with a very long answer probably, but I'll make it short. I think that the revolution is a process that has started before, but is accelerated now hugely with this uprising, and it will go on. This is an uprising in terms of actual popular uprising, people taking spontaneous action without any direction by anyone. People having the initiative to go down to the streets every day, to risk a lot of things, to take serious risks in their communities, by challenging political parties who are dominant, or by not going to work, and all of these other risks that they are taking because they believe that this is going to achieve something. The amount of grassroots reach of this uprising is fascinating. The number of people in different areas and how it was decentralized, as Taimur was saying, is really amazing. This is why it's been called the largest protest movement in the history of Lebanon, possibly. And this is why politically it's so significant, because for once it's not centralized in Beirut, and it's not within some activist bubbles. It's the general population taking action.
Timur, I asked our guests, or all of the guests, to show us something that's from this protest that really stuck out at them. You wanted to share this. This is from your Twitter feed. You say this is absolutely incredible. And then let me just play some of this video so people can actually hear what it is that you're talking about. Tell us why you wanted us to see this, Timur.
This is in the most central crossroads in Beirut, in front of the iconic mosque.
It's really cool.
Massive fire burning in the middle of the street.
This was the explosion of anger the first night. Second night. This reclaiming of the public space, but in a very sort of, in a way that was kind of angry. You basically have dispossessed people who, specifically there in the downtown area, many people were kicked out of that area following the Civil War because of the manner in which it was reconstructed. It was reconstructed in a way that's sort of in the vein of Dubai or like a big mall in Saudi Arabia or the Gulf. And that basically kicked a lot of people out. And what you saw that night was people coming and spontaneously, as people came out across the country, they came and they set a fire in the main crossroads in downtown Beirut, in front of the Muhammad al-Amin Mosque, which is this iconic blue mosque. Behind that mosque sits a Maronite church. There's also an Orthodox church, sort of representing Lebanon's sectarian coexistence. And why it stuck out to me is because the political class in this country have really entrenched themselves on the basis that they are the ones who represent and protect the various religions in this country. And that is that image in downtown with that mosque and the church behind it is sort of the picture-perfect postcard image of Lebanese coexistence, which politicians love to share, and foreign ambassadors will also share on their Twitter feeds and feel very great about. But in the background, it's really just a bunch of corrupt cronies dividing the spoils of a country while the people suffer. What you saw there is those suffering people coming and lighting a fire there, and I think the symbolism is just extremely powerful. If I could go on to speak a little bit more about public space, though, because I feel like it's important to say that those were the first days, and since then things have sort of mellowed out a bit. People are continuing to block roads, but we don't see as many fires. But public space has become a huge issue, and it's something that we've seen across the country. People reclaiming public space that has been taken away from them. That they've been. This image that you're seeing on the screen now is. It's an image I took on the top of an abandoned theater in downtown Beirut. This theater is 100 years old. During the Civil War, it became an X-rated cinema that militia leaders or militiamen would, frequent from across the divided capital. between Christian and Muslim. And after the civil war, it was cut off, shuttered to the people. And this was, the picture you're seeing there is on Friday, the second day of the uprising or the revolution, whatever you want to call it. And it's just, people were just walking around inside, sort of in this shell of a building that is from the civil war that most people haven't even experienced, but they have lived with the leaders and the warlords and the cronies of that civil war ever since. And it was just beautiful, honestly. I mean, the people were just, happy.
Look, I can see people hugging. There's obviously the emotion of being able to be in these spaces is really overwhelming. Timur, if I may just add something. I found this on aljazeera.com. They were looking at some of the pictures from the most recent days of the protests. And here on barbed wire, people are placing what they hope from this revolution, these demonstrations, what they're aiming for. We've just got this in on Twitter from Abdullah Dami. Abdullah says the Lebanese are also just human beings wanting a fulfilling life, freedom of choice, being happy without rising debts, rising taxes, shortage of jobs. People feel limited in their potential, and that's painful, especially for your people. And then we have to go and really think about what happened today when your president spoke to you for the first time in many, many days. Nizar, I see you smiling. I'm not sure that's a happy smile. Articulate that smile for us.
Today was a disappointing day, to say the least. I mean, the president seemed extremely weak, not only because he's old and tired. I'm not talking about that. He seemed weak in his rhetoric and his actual excitement or determination to do anything about the situation. And also it came after his silence for a whole week of uprisings that drove everyone, brought all attention to Lebanon, and all political leaders had to respond. And then the president of the republic did not appear till today. And when he appeared, he said really nothing. He said that I've been doing this and that. I've been trying to fight corruption. I will keep doing that. I promise to listen to you. And he threw a couple of landmines, in my opinion, for protesters and people of the uprising to step on. Most importantly, the one that says, send me your representatives, people who represent you, and I will talk to them so I can listen to them. And this is a trap, because it's basically telling them, let me know who your leaders are, so that the establishment can start attacking them, and so that these people can start making compromises on your behalf, and so that we can kill this uprising, because it's very disruptive to the country. And we should note that really what's most disturbing to the ruling class about this uprising is that it's very disruptive, as opposed to the one in 2015, for example, because people are not just demonstrating in the squares, which doesn't really disrupt anything. People are blocking roads across the country. They're disrupting economic activity, they're disrupting the governance and the public institutions, and this is what's putting pressure on the politicians. And this is probably what will lead them to make any serious compromise, and probably that the government will resign in the next few days.
Let me just leave you with one more comment. This is from Nur Tukmani, and who, on her way to protesting today, she heard what the president said, and this is what she told us. Have a listen.
Most recurring demands emerging from the streets is "Ashab yurid isqat al-nizam," which directly translates into "people want the fall of the regime." The power of these demands is that they're happening on a very non-hierarchical, decentralized, spontaneous manner across all different classes and socioeconomic backgrounds and religious sects. And so when the president, the prime minister, and the leader of the Hezbollah party respond to these social, economic, and political demands by saying they want to make reforms from within the system, we respond from the streets and say it's too little, too late. Killun yani killun. We want all of them out of power.
There is so much more to talk to our guests about, Rim, Nizar, and also Timur, but we're right at the end of the show. Thank you, guests, for helping us understand this current protest, demonstrations, revolution, however you want to categorize it, so much better in Lebanon. We'll be following you on all of your Instagram and your social accounts. Also, everybody look here. Of course, at aljazeera.com, you'll have the latest, either the insights and the news, and Stephanie Decker's work as well. She was earlier with us on the show, but for now, on Twitter, YouTube, aljazeera.com/the stream. The conversation continues there. I will see you next time. Take care, everybody.